And welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today is the first conversation in our Future of Texas podcast series with Texas 2036, where we sit down with Texas's preeminent thought leaders on what needs to be done if we plan to have success creating the Texas we want to see in the 100 years past Texas's bicentennial year of 2036. Throughout these discussions, we are putting in the emphasis on actionable insights with a focus on forward-looking decisions rather than commentary or retrospective analysis. Today's episode, Innovation Nation, Texas's Next Economic Boom, focuses on Texas's emerging role as a preeminent incubator of innovation, spurred by both an unparalleled entrepreneurism and a regulatory environment set up intentionally to spur development of the next big idea. Today's guests are ideally suited for this conversation. I'm joined by Joe Lonsdale, 8VC General Partner, Cicero Institute founder, and Palantir Technologies co-founder, and also John Hryhorchuk, Senior Vice President for Policy and Advocacy at Texas 2036. Gentlemen, how are y'all?
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Genuinely, probably the two best people to talk to about this, right? So, you know, that was a nice little intro that I just did about innovation in Texas, stuff like that. Mr. Lonsdale, I mean, you have a lot of experience in innovative VC, venture capitalist work and everything like that. And you famously, I think, you escaped California for a lot of reasons, right? I guess I want to start the conversation out with, where is Texas right now with innovation? And how do we make sure that, you know, all those same problems that you left California to come to Texas for, that we don't fall into that same trap?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Texas is way ahead of most of the rest of the country. It's in a really strong spot. We've just fixed our business courts. We're going to bring a lot of that here. We started, for example, Saronic 4 years ago is delivering, hundreds of autonomous vessels to the Navy built right here. I think if I tried to build that in California, I'd still be trying to get my permits versus delivering hundreds of vessels. And there's a lot of really good things. Now, at the same time, there's a bunch of different threats, and we could talk about some of them. We were just talking about the trial lawyers are sneaking in on both sides and left and the right, and they're doing all sorts of crazy judgments again. That ruined the state in the 90s. We got to crack down on that now and not let that grow again. There's all sorts of things with healthcare where healthcare interests have got healthcare costs going way up here the last 20 years. We have to legalize innovation and competition in healthcare. These are really critical things to work on. So there's a lot of stuff we have to make sure we protect in this state, but overall, it's still a lot ahead of everyone else.
Just to follow up, so legalize innovation in healthcare, what do you mean?
I mean that if you want to use AI right now to build something new with a nurse that is provably safer, the scope of practice laws make it illegal because the AMA is too strong. I mean that if you want to compete with a health system and do a clinic that can work with the payer, the health systems use cartel power and they block you from competition, and that should be illegal. And I mean, there's just lots of ways in which competition and innovation are blocked by state law in most states, but Texas has very powerful, very good health systems, but that means that their lobbyists are so strong that they're going to block competition even better than others. We have to find ways of overcoming that and allowing us to build and compete and show the healthcare could be cheaper, especially with AI.
Yeah. Texas is known for fostering competition, but as we look at like health systems generally, we have very consolidated markets in Texas. And consolidation is one of the leading drivers of rising healthcare costs. As it stands right now, I think it's about $36,000 is the cost of a family premium for health insurance compared to our median wage. When you think about that relatively, it is definitely having a dampening impact on overall wage growth. And it at some point is going to, the Texas miracle, our economy is still doing good, especially relative to the rest of the country. But these pressures, they grow and they compound.
And there's great policy on the table that we have to fight for. We can get across the line that will bring down the cost of healthcare. This is the type of stuff we got to be working on for the future.
Yeah, for sure. So, Texas, I think, is seen throughout the country, and certainly as a Texan, as we're sort of in an innovation boom, a tech boom.
Yeah,
right.
You got a lot of us all coming here, investing, building. Really appreciate the state.
Yeah, of course. So where are we compare? How does that compare to, say, Silicon Valley, famously, innovative area? I think still, obviously a lot of tech is still there up in the Northeast. There's a lot of tech up there. How does Texas compare?
Well, Texas has a big advantage in the real world. So if you're going to be manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, the fastest plant built in the world, it's the biggest car manufacturing plant built in 18 months was Tesla's plant here. Like our company, Saronic, so many companies, Boring companies, SpaceX, so many companies are coming here and building. I have a company, for example, that's doing autonomous excavation. A lot of their tests are here in Texas, because it's a lot easier to do that now. Unfortunately, a lot of their AI talent is still back in California. That's not really Texas's fault. There's a network effect that's been there for a very long time in California. They do have an edge in the software talent. But we have to use the advantages we have and keep building more things here.
Yeah. So, John, from a policy perspective, we have this tech boom going on. What can Texas do over the next, 1, 3, 5, 10 years up to the bicentennial in 2036 to, talk about, to help what Joe's talking about, make it easier for innovation, make sure that we stay on top of it.
Yeah, I think a lot about how blessed we've been as a state to welcome so many domestic migrants. Like when people move here, they're coming with their life experiences, their education, their talents. They're not coming with their water. They're not coming with energy. They're not coming with the infrastructure necessary to sustain the growth. So when we think about the pressures, the massive migration of intellect to Texas has been fueling the Texas miracle. We have to make sure that we have the power plants, the water systems, the roads, or the flying cars if you don't want to deal with the roads.
Or tunnels.
Yeah, there you go. To make sure that our population growth can continue to thrive, we also need to address our own human capital pipelines. Because as great as it is that we have very smart and capable people moving to Texas, we want to make sure that Texans are prepared to access those jobs in the future as well.
Are we going to get flying cars in Texas in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I invested in Joby 11 years ago. It's a public company that's supposed to be launching in Texas in the next year. So, and the FAA is just finishing their last year with them. So yes, we are going to get flying cars. I actually bought some land near my house for a place that other people can use as well, just to have a place to land there.
I love this because most places I go where I talk about this, people look at me like I'm crazy. And I think realistically, before 2030, we're going to be seeing these things.
You're definitely listening. The prototypes work. Toyota is a major investor, teaching them how to scale massively, and they're literally in their final part of the FAA after many years. And these are much safer than helicopters, much cheaper than helicopters, 100 times quieter than helicopters. So this stuff's coming.
Yeah, it's not just that they're coming, but like there are autonomous versions of these that are under development. So it's you're not just talking about having a traditional helicopter pilot style of travel. It is fully autonomous vehicles in the skies of Texas over the next 10 years.
I don't know that I want an autonomous flying car, right? I learned how to drive, and that's something nice. I know how to do it. Like, okay, so maybe I can have an autonomous car because I know how to drive, but I want to fly. I want to do that.
I'm not sure we want you to fly.
Well, that's a good point.
Scale in the city. But the bigger thing, and I love Joby Aviation, and Archer's the competitor. There's real serious companies there. The bigger one for Texas is probably the tunnels, even though I said it jokingly. Like we're on the 1 yard line getting approval to start digging here, and these tunnels they're digging them in Nashville. In Vegas, you land at the airport, go underground to hotels now. This is a real thing, and this is a very affordable thing, and we're going to push it hard in Texas.
So the point of tunnels is I guess with roads and everything like that, there's only so much left and right that you can go.
The 3 dimensions is really, really helpful, especially for the masses. I think Joby could be used by a lot of people, by a middle-class person in a rush occasionally, by upper-middle class, maybe you can use it all the time. But the tunnels is for moving millions of people, and actually I think we're going to end up connecting the triangle, right? We're going to connect Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and Austin, and you're going to be able to get everywhere much faster with these things down. And you can do the whole thing for relatively cheap.
Yeah. So, just to sort of, talk more about the future of innovation here in Texas, there's what sort of Texas-specific factors have sort of underpinned this? Like what, is it purely just the regulatory landscape, the no income tax? Like what is it that brings people to Texas, that like innovators and investors?
There's a combination of things. I think the bold kind of individualist entrepreneurial spirit. I think the type of people that had to come here, the forefathers of Texas. And I think we just had the 190th revolution, and you read about these guys and you read about those communities. I think in part because it was so dangerous, because they had to fight with some very, very aggressive Indian tribes like these Comanches were very serious.
Yeah,
I think it created this culture that really admired kind of independence and like strong-willed, bold characters, and who would fight for their freedom, protect that freedom. And obviously, we're not the same as we were 180 years ago, but I think we still have a lot of that energy here, which is really attractive to entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I like to think of myself as a cowboy sometimes, but I know I don't have the hat. I probably couldn't ride a horse quite as well, but I like to feel it sometimes. As people come here, and again, the landscape changes, I want to talk to you, John, about, again, sort of focusing more on policy. A lot of policy thought and effort went into the past, I don't know, I guess the Texas Miracle started in 2010, something like that?
I'd say basically from 2000 onward, you have seen in the data that Texas has added a significant part of the United States economic growth has been concentrated.
Yeah.
A disproportionate amount has been happening in Texas, and it continues to go up. It's a great problem. It creates some challenges to our infrastructure, but we have the resources because of our economic growth to solve problems that other places don't. We come from a position of strength when we have our water challenges. We're talking about putting billions of dollars into solving our water infrastructure. Well, California is dealing with deficits.
Yep.
So it's like, we are, because of our innovation, because we're welcoming people, because we're able to do these things, we're talking about building tunnels, we're talking about autonomous vehicles, we're talking about all this future stuff that can continue our growth. That's going to generate revenue for the state. That's going to be able to then create kind of a virtuous cycle of sorts where we can continue to invest in those things that are going to drive the future growth.
And let's talk about the last 30 years, because I actually just had lunch with my friend Dick Weekly, who started in the 90s leading TLR, which is one of the groups here.
Yeah.
And there's a group of people like him who really got involved in politics 30 years ago. And again, they fought to fix the trial law problem. That was a major problem that was destroying Texas in the 90s. They overcame it. They took away the power from those 7 kind of billionaire trial lawyers flying around their private jets, like basically raping businesses and forcing them to leave. That was a really big deal. They did a lot of stuff with regulation to reduce regulation. There's a lot of like really core kind of pro-liberty values that people had to fight for in Texas. These things don't just happen. It was a group of men. It was a group of leaders who pushed for these things really, really hard and who succeeded. And so I think it takes all of us who are now here, who are now the leaders. We also have to fight for these values. If we don't fight for these values, if we don't fight for these policies, then things can very easily revert back and we can lose the miracle.
Well, one of the things that I think is so great about Texas culture, and you talk about the values, there's this every Texan kind of has this core sense of being Texan in a way that I don't think is true of people in like Alabama.
A lot of Texans think of themselves as Texans before anything else.
Well, yeah, we have our cultural shibboleths. We're all wearing our boots and hats and all that, and we believe that Texas is awesome, and it is.
Sure.
But that shared belief, Republican, Democrat, whatever, Texas is awesome. Let's continue to make it awesome. Let's do the things necessary. Let's look at our fellow Texans and promote the growth of well-being for Texans. That is unique in across the 50 states.
Yeah,
and it's the kind of thing that people want that in terms of national patriotism, et cetera. Like you want to be proud of your country where you live, your neighbors. It allows for a unity of action that is helpful when you're trying to solve big long-term problems.
No, this is our republic. At the front of my house, we fly the Texas flag the same height as the American flag. It's the way you do it around here.
That's right. So, so you described, having lunch with TLR, 30 years of work, the Texas Miracle, and so, from a business perspective and from a policy perspective, the 90th Texas legislature is around the corner. The 91st will be after that, and we'll have all these different sessions that come up leading up to the bicentennial in 2036. From a business perspective and from a policy perspective, how can we protect that and make sure that Texas maintains this? Maybe maintain is the wrong word. Maybe that's not what we want to do. Maybe what we want to do is actually unleash it even more.
Yeah, I think you want to keep. I think if you hit some of the key things, we got to keep building the infrastructure. We got to stay ahead. I think one of the best signs of how well people are doing is the cost and availability of electricity, because that runs into every other part of the economy. We have a lot of work to do there. I think we've done a good job the last few years. We could do a lot better job. We have a lot of government waste we can still get rid of, frankly. A lot of government stuff that doesn't function as well. We got a lot of cities, and this is maybe, I don't know if this is too annoying for people, but we have a lot of cities that are kind of getting away with a lot of nonsense right now. And so if you look at Austin, if you look at Houston, if you look at San Antonio, they've raised taxes a lot. They're spending it on a lot of nonsense. Those cities are actually not allowed to do that. The state doesn't let them. So we need the state to crack down and say, sorry, this is not how Texas does things. We're going to hold you accountable. We're going to force you to spend accountably based on outcomes. We're going to force you to be transparent. We're going to get rid of your political lobbying where you tax people and use it to lobby. There's a lot of bold stuff I think we need to see the government and the state do to step up and kind of cut off the stuff that's not Texas.
Yeah, I'd add that there's some like really unsexy things that need to happen in government in order to promote the kind of efficiency that we're talking about. Like state data systems are so antiquated. We have this problem, right? The workforce is changing rapidly. There are articles out of the Wall Street Journal that the Harvard class of 2025 can't find jobs at McKinsey in New York, and it's national news. So what happened to the graduating class at the University of Texas at Austin in 2025? We know everyone who graduated in May 2025 through Texas Workforce Commission data. We know every single person employed in Q3 and Q4 in the state of Texas. we don't know whether or not the graduates of the University of Texas of Austin got jobs because we have bifurcated data systems. Everything operates in its own little silo. Nobody's integrating. Nobody's using this data that's collected for compliance, for insights and action.
And the data really should be guiding what our university is doing. It's not purely a vocational university, by the way. There are other reasons you go to university, but we should be aware of this. And to put my finger in the beehive. Yeah, there's a lot of things these universities do, even in Texas, that are completely against Texas values. If you go to a women's studies class right now at UT Austin, you're learning to hate America, to hate markets, to hate capitalism, to be ashamed of Texas history. It's just completely brainwashing, and you're not getting good jobs out of that. And then we should get the data, we should show what the jobs are, and we should be turning off the nonsense at our taxpayer-funded places because there shouldn't be all this nonsense there.
Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity as we look at what we've done in terms of our Texas State technical colleges and how to align those to workforce needs. The recent community college reforms have started doing behavioral shifts so that they're a lot more focused on their local labor markets. And there's a current effort going on right now at the Higher Education Coordinating Board to look into how our university systems can have a little bit more tailored outcomes-based funding as a component of their
I love it. We work in CISRO with nationwide, a bunch of different states, and everyone's learning from the Texas results from the technical schools here because we funded them based on outcome funding, and it just all of a sudden they start teaching the skills that mattered. It really, really worked for those 27 schools. I'm pushing us to try to think about this more for community colleges too. We didn't actually do the outcome funding. We just kind of encouraged them. I really feel like you need the outcome funding if you really want the best results because then it actually changes behavior more.
Yeah.
So a lot of this boom that we're seeing, obviously a lot of it has to do with AI. AI is different today than it was. I think ChatGPT, OpenAI just released a brand new version today. It's supposedly better than the version that got released a couple months ago. I'm sure it is better. It's changing so rapidly, and all of the different ones, Claude and Grok and everything. So, that's going to change how we interact just as regular people, and I'm sure even at high levels for business, how people interact with innovation. How can we tackle the AI? Is it a problem? I don't know. An AI problem.
Opportunity.
Sure, it's an opportunity. There's opportunities and problems, I think, with this new technology. How do we tackle that as Texans to make sure that we stay innovative and it lifts people up rather than leaves people behind?
Well, first of all, we should be using it more in our government, right? Because what this does is it adds new types of agency and intelligence to watch everything going on. Governments in general, as we all know, tend to be very wasteful. They tend to be funding things that don't work, that no one even thinks about for 20 years. And you come back and you say, oh, what is this? Tens of millions of dollars here. What is this here? But this allows us to watch everything, allows us to make things more accountable, allows us to make things smarter, allows us to make it more easier to interact with government. Like every interaction with government, we could be watching now, we could be figuring out, we can be measuring, we can be improving using this extra intelligence. There's just a lot we could do, first of all, to make our government better, which I think is one of the first things you should do as Texas.
Yeah. Okay.
I think about how the Claude co-work updates have changed just how we do our work at Texas 2036 in recent weeks. We are able to turn data into insight at a speed that was impossible weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that's allowing us to process through questions that are far more complex, iterate, fail, try again, and advance in a way that's going to shape how we are able to then inform our recommendations to the Texas legislature. What if our agencies were doing that too? What if they were able to find solutions to problems that have for entire careers been perceived as unsolvable? Think about the government performance elements of using your taxpayer dollars more efficiently to solve concrete problems that improve people's lives. That's viable.
Yeah.
So, to support all of the AI growth that we're seeing, data centers is a big issue here in Texas today and has been for, I would say maybe the past year or so, as those grow, pushback in rural communities for water, energy usage, maybe noise complaints, that sort of thing. But a lot of people describe it as essential infrastructure.
It is.
Well, make that case for me.
I mean, this is how you compete in the 21st century. This is without the data centers, you're not going to be able to have the businesses that are on the cutting edge. A lot of people have come here, and by the way, the people who have come here overall, people should know this, tend to be more pro-liberty than people who are born here. So just as an example, I'm not trying to be too political here, but for example, Ted Cruz's race against Beto O'Rourke, he would have lost if only people born in Texas were voting. So you actually have more liberty-driven people coming here who are building businesses. A lot of businesses coming here. This infrastructure allows these businesses to compete and win in the global economy. If I cannot use those data centers, I have to build my business somewhere else. So this is this key infrastructure that's letting us win. And what this does is it adds intelligence, it adds output. So this is not, listen, I realize every industrial revolution, you get a lot of fear. You had the Luddites in the 19th century.
Sure.
But like 1870 and 1900, the median working class person was well over twice as wealthy after that 30 years, well over twice as wealthy in real terms. So this is like completely transforms things. And it's not, and people think, oh, well, this time you destroy everything. It's not true. You don't destroy everything. You're gonna have productivity go up. It might not even go up as much as that revolution. I hope it does. But when productivity goes up, it creates more output. It creates disinflation. It makes us all wealthier, and we want that to happen here in Texas, not somewhere else.
Yeah. I guess when the horse and buggy makers didn't like it when the car was invented, right?
My wife had an ancestor on the Federal Reserve Board from the South, and he actually owned one of the buggy whip factories, and he just was convinced the cars were the worst thing for the economy. It's like, and you can't help it, I think, when you're like so against your own personal interests. Like I get it that it's like, but it's very clearly like all the signs we're seeing. This is really, really good for output and for the economy. And there's so many things we could do to make our government better, to make our businesses better.
Well, I see that at least when we're at the Capitol, I hear a lot of people expressing concern about the data centers. And it's because there are examples out there that people can point to and they go, oh, that's using a lot of water, or oh, that's, driving up the localized cost of electricity. But that's not the whole story here. Like there are components of this where there are those data centers that are extremely energy efficient or off-grid energy, those that are extremely water efficient. There are design choices that can be made in this process that make it more integrated into a community and
I actually don't think it's unreasonable to require people to cover extra costs of electricity and not make the cost of electricity go up for everyday citizens. Like that's a very reasonable argument to have. We should be requiring, especially big tech companies, to pay for the extra costs that they're imposing to create more electricity. We should be working with them to make it easier to invest, by the way, to generate more electricity, to not bring the cost up. These are types of things we definitely should be doing. Like I'm not at all against making sure those people like internalize the cost they're imposing through building something. That's reasonable.
Sure. Yeah. On the show, I've talked to geothermal experts and nuclear experts about how to solve that problem. And oftentimes with the data center conversation, small modular nuclear reactors, that conversation comes up. I'm curious from not only an investor point of view, but from a policy point of view. It seems like Texas could be on the leading edge of a new nuclear era.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, are we ready for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's laws last time that would give a $100 million bonus, I believe, to the first person to actually get one up and running. So it's encouraging some companies to run hard at that.
$100 million, you said?
I think it was $100 million for the first SMR up and running. I don't know.
They want it. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying. Well, I maybe need to stop the podcast earlier. I got work to do.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty good deal. I actually think big nuclear is actually even more efficient, although SMR is very exciting. I mean, yeah, we should be encouraging all of this here. I mean, listen, there's companies here like Base Power that are putting billions of dollars of batteries on our grid, which all of us should be grateful for. Michael Dell's son, Zach Dell, started this company, and he's done an extraordinary job. And that makes all of our grid more resilient and better too, because that's especially given all the solar and wind we have. So there's just a lot of things we should be encouraging for investment to help this out.
Yeah. From a policy point of view on the nuclear side?
I think that the lawmakers of Texas are certainly ready. I mean, they passed the bill last session. The public, can be ready with the right messaging out there because it is safe, it is reliable, and it provides that baseline power that's so important for our grid stability and cost. When we see those other innovations out there, like the base power, I think that is so cool.
It's great. I mean, I'm grateful as a Texan, by the way, because it just makes the grid so much more likely to be stabilized and work. Because the problem with all these renewables is that renewables only work sometimes, and then you need the base, what's called base power. You need the base power there. And so now we have all these batteries that'll fill up when there's extra sun or extra wind, and they can release it in the other times. This just smooths out the consumption. It's just awesome for the state.
So talking about workforce and workforce development, both of you have children, both being raised here in Austin. How do you guys evaluate quality of life for the next generation, the education system? Are we meeting the demands as Texans, as a state, to educate our children to be ready for this stuff?
We're starting to go the right way, but we're definitely not there yet. I think the school choice bill last time was a very good step in the right direction. I understand it's massively oversubscribed in terms of its popularity, and I think it's crazy we're not letting just a lot more kids, especially the poor working class and middle class kids, sign up for this to give them choice, because my kids obviously have choice because they can afford it. And there's people here in Austin actually like Joe Lamont building Alpha, who wants to scale up thousands of those. He has versions of it, right, where it's 2 hours a day to get way ahead academically. Then they have sports or life skills, and there's all sorts of really cool things being built like this in Texas of new types of schools. I think Texas is going to be a center of new schools if we can keep scaling choice.
When I think about some of the challenges that we face as a state educationally, people sometimes aren't willing to acknowledge the challenges in front of them. So we have high schools in Austin, Texas, where 10% of our high school students are doing math at grade level.
Yeah.
And that's just not acceptable. And we know that these students are capable of learning. There was a high school in Houston that had an F rating for 12 consecutive years. It prompted the takeover of Houston ISD.
Take it away from the unions.
Well, what they've been able to do in just a short time is turn that from a relative performance standpoint into competing at the same level as a Highland Park or a Westlake in terms of student academic performance.
Yeah.
Public policy intervention with strategies that are aligned to achieve it, and accountability and transparency over performance and consequences for failure has led to a world where Houston ISD is on the brink of the greatest urban education turnaround in American history.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. It's just hard.
It's really hard because you need accountability, and the government unions are a major donor, especially on the left, but also on the right, and they don't want accountability. And so that's the challenge, is the courage to overcome this special interest.
Yeah. So, we touched on AI a little bit. I'm also a parent of 3 children, and, I think about, when do I start letting them use AI? When do I start really let them dive deep? But also think about their education and the types of careers that they say that they want when they grow up. And in the back of my mind, I'm always wondering, well, what's AI going to do with that to that career before you even get there, right? So how can we as a state make sure that our primary and post-secondary, all of the different education levels that we send them through, that they're getting ready for that next revolution?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is it's different types of AI, right? So one type of AI is social media, which is like a form of it's a drug, basically. It's
100% a drug.
It's very unhealthy. I keep my kids completely off it. I do not want them interacting with that type of AI. It's like the same way you wouldn't test out a new form of heroin on a 12-year-old. You probably shouldn't be testing out like new advanced.
I don't know that I would test a new heroin out on really anybody, but definitely not kids.
You definitely not. Well, this is why social media is dangerous for all of us. But there's reasons why it's useful for getting things done on too. That's another conversation we can have. But for kids, I definitely keep them off. But at the same time, AI is changing how we discover knowledge, how we build things, how we kind of express our agency. And I think giving kids a framework where they can do things that they couldn't have done before as assignments using AI, figuring out how to do it, figuring out how to have agency where they get it to do things with them. I think that's really important, because if your kid's not doing that, I'm not saying like this for 5-year-olds, but especially as a teenager, if you're not doing that and not practicing with that, you are going to fall behind, and you're not going to be able to get as much done with these things. I think we do need to learn how to, and this is really key. I think a lot of the careers that we give people right now, it's like you're just like going on a path. You can't do that anymore. You need to teach agency. You need to teach experimentation. You need to give them practice having opinions and practice building things, because it is going to require more agency to succeed, I think, in this world.
Yeah, there's a great survey recently comparing the perceptions of AI among people who run schools versus high school students. And the students believed that AI was impacting critical thinking skills and negatively impacting their ability to succeed in exactly the world that Joe's describing. And the adults seemed less concerned about that. And I think that's a fascinating juxtaposition of the people who are there in the moment, having their brains formed in this world, kind of know that the future that they're going to grow up in, and they have, after high school, 50, 60, 70 years of the future world ahead. There are critical thinking skills. Yes, every student needs to be able to read and do math at grade level, but we have to do more. We have to connect them to the career explorations, but also just the reasoning of how to be a citizen in our society. That level of it's harder work than we have done in the past.
Well, and you also have to learn how to do things not using the AI as well, because it's true. If you're just answering questions using AI, you're in big trouble.
Yeah,
it's like it does rot away your abilities.
Yeah, I did a panel right before doing this podcast, and a question on AI came up, and I made the point that you have a large language model already in your head, and once you start using it for all your creative processes, then I think you're losing part of your human aspect. Using it for research, stuff like that, I think is fine, but let's try to keep our creativity. So on the governance level, though, the state implemented the Texas Responsible AI Governance Act. What is that framework, and does it need improvement?
This is funny because we had to spend a lot of time stopping a lot of really dumb things they were trying to put into that, and we succeeded. So, but I mean, go ahead.
No, I think that there's a lot of really good groundwork laid in Texas. They put in place a state level regulatory construct last session, and not to say that anything is with the technology that's evolving this quickly is perfect or in its final end state. But I do think that when we're specifically thinking about things like education, we're going to have to balance a lot of the tensions, right? The tension between how AI could be used to provide individualized student tutoring or self-paced advancement, kind of getting away from the assembly line mechanisms of schools from years past. But then how do we balance that against the data privacy? Because these are children that are interacting with the data. Who owns that?
Yeah.
How is that controlled and commoditized, and how can that we kind of prevent that from being used against the interests of the children over the long term? So there's a lot of tensions that are still kind of being weaved through.
There should probably be default privacy protections for kids not to use things and know who they are and what they did when they were a kid in order to predict how to work with them in the future. That's creepy, right? So there's things like that, 100%. But at the same time, you have New York on the other extreme, which is banning the use of AI in schools, which is ridiculous because you have Alpha here in Texas that's like going into inner cities and getting kids that are way behind, figuring out what they're missing and getting them back up ahead and helping them. So the AI is actually literally already like taking kids like way further than they could have gotten before. And so banning that is just ridiculous. It's obviously wrong.
Surely New York has heard that banning things from kids only makes them use it more, right?
Yeah, but it's tough because it stops new schools from forming and stuff there. But they have such powerful special. I mean, there's a whole new law in New York. This week they're proposing to ban AI from like all sorts of licensed professions, which is just pure cronyism. It's just purely like, let's just keep all of these major professions, completely slow it in the dark and uncompetitive, and not let you ever like do things yourself. Basically, because the whole point is for engineering, for medics, and you should be able to ask questions. You should be able to yourself use your own judgment. We shouldn't stop people from that. I think part of our liberty side is that you're not going to stop people from having those conversations. Hopefully, here in Texas.
Yeah, I think it sounds like there's a balance that needs to be taken. You're on the business side of all of this, and you alluded to fighting the state on this AI regulatory framework, preventing it from doing
or teaching them sometimes. Frankly,
Sure.
It's like there's like things that people who are not technical might want to. Like, I'll give you an example, like in another state, because I don't want to attack Texas too much. But like,
of course not.
there's another person on like, populist right in our state with a law. And they say, Joe, you don't like Chinese credit scores, right? And like, no, I don't like Chinese credit scores. Like,
Sure.
Screw the CCP. They say, well, I'm worried the AI tech companies are going to have credit scores and for people. So I'm going to make a law saying you can't keep any scores on any people. And I said, well, that sounds good at first, but if you actually understand how you build systems, let's say I'm building a customer service system with AI, I'm going to need to score certain things in order to remember how to interact with you better. I'm going to need to score all sorts of things for when I interact with people. That's just the nature of how you do that. With Uber, Uber has to score you, right?
Yeah.
It's very important. And so you don't want these rules or these regulatory apparatuses being created in the States that just like break things and force every company building something to have to go and ask for an exception. It's silly. It's not how liberty works. And so you have to teach people that this would break things if you did it this way. So we have to capture the spirit sometimes, but then not pass the law that breaks stuff.
So here in Austin, we have the Army Futures Command HQ, and I feel like that's sort of a focal point for innovation on the in a unique way. And I'm wondering, do you interface with that at all? I mean, you mentioned, I think the autonomous boats. I think you said at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah. So after starting Palantir 23 years ago and kind of helping them break through, 3 of my guys from Palantir started Anduril with Palmer Luckey, which is the top new defense company on the hardware side, and then we founded Saronic here in Texas, which is obviously autonomous warships, which both the Army and the Navy and others all work with. And we also got involved in a bunch of other things. So about 20% of my firm is focused on starting and helping defense companies. And the Army Futures Command has been a great group to work with. General George is the general who runs the entire Army, and he and Secretary Driscoll, their Secretary of the Army, have been kind of the service that's been the most innovative the last year or two, like just really changing the future of how the Army works, really reorganizing everything around innovation. And we just had General Jim Rainey retire. He was a 4-star who ran Army Futures, and he did a lot of great work. There's new people in charge now, but our Army innovation is definitely like a big deal right now in general in the Pentagon. It's awesome having a lot of that talent here to work with.
Yeah, so I mean, Texas has historically played a prominent role in national defense, and I'm wondering how it's positioned to continue to sort of be on that vanguard of tech, changing the fundamentals really of how warfare is done, sort of on the battlefield. I mean, you're talking about autonomous, boats and Navy and stuff like that. Where are we going with that, and what is Texas's role?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you got a lot of the You got a lot of the most famous veterans here. You got the guys. You got the admiral who ran special forces groups, who was the only admiral ever to go on all the missions himself. Kind of like Captain Picard or something. He's supposed to go, and he goes anyway. And he's amazing, Wyman Howard. He's retired here. You got all sorts of veterans. And Dino, who runs Saronic, was on the SEALs for over a decade. And so these people are involved in the future of it. And listen, it's going to be a lot more autonomy. It's going to be a lot more like working with the machines, but you're still going to have the SEALs and the special forces, especially, as well as other leaders who are iterating with them. There's going to be more machines per person, but you still need the warfighters. And we're lucky we have that community here. That community is working with innovators here. So it's a key part of Texas economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating, especially with what's going on in the news now over in the Middle East, and just sort of imagining what that looks like. And I feel like a lot of innovation will happen in that sector first and sort of trickle down into the consumer.
Well, what you're seeing right now this week, actually, with what's going on with Operation Epic Fury, is really the culmination of many years of innovators kind of getting involved and kind of reinvigorating the innovation side of national defense. It's really impressive. This is obviously the first AI war, and there's the way the targeting works, the way that the speed of everything going on. Would not have been possible, 5 years ago. And because we've done this correctly, we've moved 20 years ahead of our adversaries. It's almost like we moved 20 years in the last 5 years, and they're fighting from another era. We're just crushing them.
Yeah. So a question for both of you: what can young innovators? I would like to include myself, but I'm not that young. Certainly, maybe an innovator. What can young innovators in Texas, young Texans, do? Maybe your children, my children. People that are about to graduate, go into college. Perhaps they're trying to decide what to do with their lives. How can young innovators take advantage of what's happening, of the landscape in Texas now and over the next 10 years?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of really high growth, innovative companies based here now, whether it's Saronic with several hundred people here in Austin, whether it's Elon's companies, SpaceX, Boring Company, Tesla, whether there's so many others now that are going on here, Dallas, Houston, everywhere. I think get to know these people, figure out what skills they're hiring for. If you apply and don't get in when you're really young, figure out what they need, what you need to be good at before you can get in. And just, the way I really got to learn technology is I was lucky to grow up in Silicon Valley. And I went to try to work at PayPal my freshman year at university, and they rejected me. But I worked really hard, and I got in my sophomore year, and I ended up learning from a bunch of these guys. And I think now that we have a lot of these things here, I think you could do something similar if you're interested.
And from a less technical side, I would just say, look at the world and see the problems that need to be solved. So long as there are problems in the world, there is a room to create. Yeah. There is unlimited opportunities for jobs in an AI future, so long as there are problems. And until we reach utopia, there will be.
Very well said. I love that. Yeah, exactly. You can always repair the world. There's always something to do.
Yeah, and so just don't close your eyes. Look around, see something, fix it, and understand that if you don't have the skills, develop them. But if there's a problem out there, do it.
And go get to know people in business, in government. If there's something annoying them, something that could be done better, help them with it, right?
Yeah.
There's just so many things. I mean, this is a great thing. As humanity's actually still we're human. We're very flawed. Everything's broken everywhere. So it's there's so much to build right now. And AI lets you solve these problems in ways much more easily than you ever could before. So as an entrepreneur today, there's more opportunity than there ever has been before in the history of the world. You just have to have energy and interest and just go and solve problems.
So, John, as Texas looks towards 2036, the bicentennial, that's why we're doing all of this. 200. That's a good age to be. I think we're looking pretty good for 200 years old.
Yeah,
we look good. What is Texas 2036 as an organization watching most closely to know whether or not the state is doing enough to encourage innovation?
When we look at innovation, I think it's easy to just get the high level figures of GDP and say, well, I guess everything's going fine. But bringing it back to some of those underpinning things, we want to make sure that, the grid is stable and that energy is cheap, because cheap energy fuels innovation. We want to make sure that our water infrastructure is in place, because without it, people will move away. That is a societal fact. We know that we have to have our education workforce systems optimized to exist in this. So what are we doing in terms of the third grade reading levels? How many students are graduating from high school with career-aligned credentials of value, or pursuing post-secondary education and actually completing it afterwards and going on to good jobs? All those are early indicators that kind of create the ecosystem. And to Joe's point, you need the regulatory environment. You need to have a lot of the other kind of intangible factors in place, that those values that allow individuals to bring that creative spark and to flourish. But from a government perspective, you need to have the baseline there so that individuals like Joe can build and grow their companies.
Yeah, or even turn into the next Joe Lonsdale, right? Yeah. So, Joe, I want to ask you, maybe there's a Texas parent out there listening to this, and they're wondering sort of what the next 10 years looks like. Maybe there's some anxiety there about AI or, affordability or, a lot of different things, education, healthcare. We touched on all of that. Is there anything from this conversation that they may have heard that you think should give them confidence?
I mean, I think John said it really well. As long as there are things in the world left to fix and we're not in a utopia, there will be jobs. And things people are scared of are the same things that are going to create a massive amount of wealth for Texas. And so if Texas continues to be a much wealthier place, there's going to be a lot more demand. There's going to be a lot more types of businesses that can get paid a lot more for the same jobs. And because we're a wealthier society, the guy who does sports medicine massage can get paid a hell of a lot more than he would have trying to do that 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's just so many things you could do, whether you're going to technical school, whether you're going into a services industry. By the way, there's hundreds of thousands of small businesses around Texas where the people owning them are going to retire and someone else has to take over in the next 10 years. So there's just so many things you could do to make money, to make a living, to succeed. The key thing is to teach agency to your children, teach them to play with the AI, teach them to learn the basics, learn your math, learn your reading, learn business, be interested in business, and then you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I think so much when I leave Texas, sometimes unfortunately I have to.
Sure.
Going up to DC, the level of cynicism that you see about the future is just jarring. And when we come back to Texas, and especially here in Austin, and there's an autonomous car on every street corner, and there's new buildings going up, and so much energy and excitement, I think that we're in a special place right now. And so when I think about like the next 2 to 10 years, I'm thrilled that my children get to grow up in Texas. There's nowhere else I'd want them to be. And we have things we can do to make Texas better, but this is the best place to be in the greatest country in the history of the earth.
Yeah. I mean, there's really 2 categories of things. We got to stop the nonsense, right? You got to crack down on the city's nonsense and fix it. You got to crack down on the trial lawyer nonsense, and you got to crack down on a lot of nonsense, which we're done well in the past, but we got to do again. Then we got to build. We got to build the infrastructure. Got to build the energy. Got to build the water. I would like to build tunnels everywhere and get rid of traffic. It's very cheap and doable. I think it's one of those things that's like kind of obvious when you look at the numbers, but we just need a little bit of political will. But there's always basics we got to get done to make this place great. But I think right now we're going in the right direction.
Yeah. And lastly, I would love for you to just paint a picture of what 2036 looks like. What does that look like what does Texas look like in 10 years? Is it flying cars? Is it tunnels? Is it kids, innovating on AI? What does that look like?
I think it's cheaper housing. I think infrastructure is better for getting all around. I think education, especially if we keep pushing choice, is going to be a hell of a lot better. And it's going to be more interesting for kids, less boring. Sure. And I think it's going to be a lot wealthier society even than now. I think we can be in a really, really wonderful place if we get these things right.
I like to think about things that are currently pain points in life that have the potential to become joy. So right now, people sit out on I-35 or on Mopac and their commutes for 45 minutes in traffic. And what happens when the autonomous car has you facing into your family instead of having them in the back seat?
Yeah.
So you're interacting with your children and creating positive memories. Maybe you're tutoring them, reading, doing something that's bringing your family together, something that to us now seems crazy. Why would your commute home suddenly have joy? But it can, and that future is out there. It's not that far because of innovators, because of technology, and because our state is willing to embrace change in a positive way.
Well, I think that's a great place to close. Joe Lonsdale, thank you so much. John Hryhorchuk, of course, thank you. As we close today's conversation, we're paying attention to the decisions being made now that will help ensure Texas remains the top spot for business relocations and expansions. Success there is facilitated by our ambition and persistence in tackling systemic change and unlocking opportunity for Texans of all stripes. To learn more about how Texas 2036 is tracking progress and measuring outcomes across the state, visit texas2036.org. Next week, we continue the conversation and look at how Texas is preparing the workforce of the future. Thank you so much for listening to the Future of Texas podcast series on Texas Talks.